Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer, and today we're going to have another fantastic and incredible episode for you guys today. So I'm going to begin with non-cognitive leak questions today. I just want to talk about Trump's tweets about South Africa and how awesome they are. I think that they are incredible tweets that he is doing, that he's standing up for South Africa. If you guys weren't aware, is that last night he sent out a tweet about South Africa's proposed expropriation of land, or land confiscation bill that they just signed into law. It's going to give the government the power to take land from white farmers and hand it out to blacks. So it is obviously bad. It's a human rights violation, as it should be obvious. And Trump is threatening to sanction South Africa over it. And South Africa is claiming, oh, no, it's legal and equitable and blah, blah, blah. And so it is pretty awesome he is standing up for the Boers, because no one else is going to stand up for the Afrikaners except for Trump. And this is the type of stuff we wanted him to do in the first term. And I just can't get over, with all these actions that he's doing, and we're going to be talking about a lot of his executive orders and everything else he's been going on about with a lot of the cotton league questions. But I just want to say is that, like, this is another reminder that Trump is doing what we wanted him to do the first term, and likely due to low political capital, likely due to not having any plans. Like, no one was coming up with plans. There was no Project 2025 at that time. He had to depend entirely on the GOP establishment. And there weren't any people proposing serious plans. Like, the alt-right had no fucking plans, and they didn't really have a lot of serious people to send into the admin, as seen with a lot of their failures in 2017. So there weren't like that many people to go in with these plans. He just was winging it the whole time. And Mitch McConnell and others would manipulate him into doing stupid stuff or limiting in what he could do. And there was a greater woke backlash towards Trump in his first term than now. I mean, he's doing all this radical, crazy stuff. And I mean, I keep pointing this out in articles and the podcast. A lot of people are probably annoyed with me saying this, but it cannot be said enough, is that Trump is just doing whatever he wants, and no one else can really do anything about it. And so this is a big difference from the first term. So he's able to, I remember he had a tweet about South Africa in 2018, simply after watching a Tucker Carlson segment, and there was a huge backlash against it, even from conservatives, over the matter that he simply was talking about, like, farm murders and bad things going on in South Africa. Now he's threatening sanctions, and everyone's just like, oh, well, and all these countries are now realizing that Trump means business with it. It's like with the trade war with Canada and Mexico, even though I think that might be, there's almost a risk that Trump is doing too much in his first days, that maybe you should, focus on a few things and ensure that they happen, because some of the things might be a little bit risky and undermine other things he wants to do. I think that trade, I'm still trusting the plan on the trade war and all that stuff. So I'm not too worried about it. But at the same time, you're a little wondering whether it will turn out the way it is. It is really funny we're doing a trade war with Canada of all countries at this moment. But yeah, so the South Africa move, it is bold and necessary. I think, I don't really need to tell listeners about all the terrible things that South Africa is doing. I think it is high time for the American government to step in over the corruption and anti-white racism that is rife and prevalent in South Africa. And so it is good for Trump to finally do something about the Afrikaners and to help them out in their time of need, as no one else is. They've been left to their fate. It's very funny that, past American governments would complain about, some European country limiting migrants, while in South Africa, they pretty much allow farm murders, land confiscation, and all these things to go unpunished. But we simply shrug our shoulders and say it's racist to even notice. Now, with second term Trump, we're finally doing something about it, and hopefully it has, the right the right outcome. And so, I think even presenting it as a humanitarian intervention is smart because, it might not be what we want to hear, but it's how you present this thing to the world stage. It's like, oh, taking white farmers' land is a violation of their human rights. And it's hard for, a lot of international bodies and others to say, well, it's just their country and we can't overlook this. And then it's like, hey, you know, European courts say it's against the human rights of murderers and rapists to be deported to their home country. How can you just say it's pro human rights to allow white farmers to have their land taken by the government and given to someone else simply for racial policy? It's very hard to defend that, and so they're going to have to defend that on the world stage, and it's not going to go well for South Africa, in my opinion. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, or talk about that for a little bit, and then go into the Cod and Elite questions. As a reminder, you too can get the power to ask me questions or suggest guests and topics if you sign up for the Cod and Elite option at Highly Respected Substack, and that's just for less than $16 a month. You get the power to ask me questions, suggest guests and topics, and do all this great stuff if you sign up at Highly Respected Substack. That's at highly-respected.com. And if you don't really need the power to ask me questions or suggest guests and topics, but want to listen to the mailbag and the IQ supplement, make sure to sign up for the paid subscriber option at Highly Respected Substack. So we're going to jump into the questions. We're going to start off with Ken today. Ken's got two questions. He's got, He's got, first, what's your honest take on the deportations? I'm still white-pilled, but it seems like they're evening out at around high 900s, low 1000s each day. Do you think this number will increase over time? If so, by how much? If not, do you think that this is about the average per day number we should expect over the next 4 years? And he's a little bit downcast on the deportations. Well, the thing to keep in mind is that these are 3 times higher. The figures, if you'd say like around 1,000, it's over 3 times higher than the number under Biden. Biden, it was 300. It was around 300. That was the average daily. So now we're at 1,000, and he's trying to increase it. He was ordering that they need to get it up to 1,800 per day. I think right now is that they're have limited resources. You have to remember is that Biden defunded them and cut a lot of their operations, and now they're just starting up again. And so they are limited in a bit of what they can do right now. Now, once they get more funding and more resources, which the GOP Congress is trying to get through reconciliation bill and get all the funding that Border Patrol and ICE need to enforce Trump's immigration priorities, they can probably increase those numbers to having a minimum of 1,800 per day. And, they are just picking up whatever illegals they can find. So this is like a good thing. Like, people were worried, they're just going to go after criminals. Well, they're just getting any who they can find because they have a quota to meet. So they're just picking up all illegal immigrants that they can find. The easiest ones to find, whether they're criminals or not. I mean, they're all criminals, as the White House makes mention. But if they have a high quota to meet, say 1,800 to 2,000, then they're going to be picking up a lot of people, and it's not going to be solely criminals. So it's going to be sending a message to all illegal immigrants that it's time for them to self-deport rather than risk deportation. It's time to deport on their own schedule rather than ours. So I'm not that down on it because I realize what the limitations of what right now, it's very hard for an agency to do 300 and then go to 3,000 per day. They're working up towards it. The fact that they're trying to get over 1,000 per day is good. Yes, we want those numbers to increase, but the more that they increase, the more migrants are going to be self-deporting, likely maybe even double the figure of the ones we're deporting as is. And, there's tons of news reports now about how illegal immigrants are terrified. They're worried that ICE is going to deport them, and ICE is out and very active in a lot of communities that are known for having illegal immigrants. So it is sending the right message, and it is encouraging self-deportation. So we hope that it occurs. So if they get the resources they need, it can bump up to probably 2,000 per day, maybe more. I don't know. Some people are like imagining that like they're gonna have like 10,000 per day. I mean, it's we don't have like there are limited resources here, but as long as we're getting four figures per day, I think it's pretty good. It's going to be three to four times higher than under Biden, and that is a significant improvement. We like it to improve even more. We don't want to rest on our laurels, and we hope, and I think it is being conveyed to these illegals that it's time to. You're no longer welcome. It's time to get the hell out of here. And I think that's being communicated by ICE just patrolling these neighborhoods and communities where there are a lot of illegal immigrants are and trying to find the ones that they have on their list and everything. So far, no, I'm optimistic about it. I think some people might be wanting more, but we'll wait and see when they get the increased resources and funding. A lot of this can be blamed on Biden about how he crippled deportation operations under his administration, and now they're trying to kickstart it again. So they're working with what they have, but hopefully Congress gets them the money they need to improve on this. So, second question from Ken. Ken asks in his second question, how do you square your pro-fraternity position with your anti-drug position? When I was in a fraternity, drug use was very common among all the different fraternities, and this made me reticent to be totally anti-drug because I don't want to see white frat guys getting felony possession charges. What drug usage not common in your day, or do you just viewed fraternity drug use as an unfortunate aspect of Greek life? It depends on drug use. Like, the main problem I have with drug use is like when you're doing it when you're an adult. When you're in high school and college, I don't recommend it, and I still opposed to it. But I think you can have there's more of a justification for it, or more of an understanding for it. People go wild in their late teens, early 20s. So this is what happens. When drug use, in my fraternity, the thing is I really didn't like weed. When I became more anti-weed in my fraternity, because we would get all these potheads in our fraternity, and they wouldn't, they'd be flunking their classes. They wouldn't be paying their dues because they're blowing all their money on weed, and they're just lazy and bringing sketchy types that they had been made friends with, are bringing their drug dealer behind. And I was like, I don't want these fucking losers here. Get them the hell out of here. So I became, my anti-weed stance was actually made in fraternity life. Now, this is a long time ago. This is the early 2010s. So I would imagine that weed usage is probably higher now, even among more elite, among even the top tier SEC fraternities. I mean, the big drug use, the fratty drug use was coke, which, unlike a lot of all the right wing people, I am anti coke. But this is a controversial opinion. People are like, "Oh, I'm anti weed, pro coke." No, they both suck. I'm very universally anti drug. But I mean, if it's if you're people are gonna party and experiment with stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I don't like the particularly drug usage, but this is people being wild and crazy in the early 20s. It's just a natural part of how young men are. The real issue is when they continue these habits as being adults. If they're smoking weed every fucking day when they're 25, we don't like that. When you are occasionally smoking weed in college with your fraternity brothers, or you experiment with some other drugs, not really Greer had approved, but it's whatever. And so I'm still pro Greek life. Not everything about Greek life is good, but the drug use is probably one of the things I'm probably the least problematic. The more problematic aspect is the kind of conformism into a particular bourgeois mindset that everything is just about making money and that's it. And it kind of becomes a crass materialism in there in the fraternity system. But it's far better than the alternatives. But that does creep up a lot in those circles, but it almost in its an extreme version of what is the American bourgeoisie as it already exists. But otherwise, I'm very pro fraternity. I always defend them. I think we should be pro fraternity. I think a lot of people's attacks on fraternities are less based on rational reasons and more based on resentment. So we are pro fraternity still. So we got that. We've got a lot of questions about the helicopter or the plane crash in D.C. So we're gonna probably go with those once we get a hold of them. Actually, hold on. Kingslander asked similar question to Ken. I was looking around for this. I knew that there was another question, so I should have said this. Kingslander had also was downcast on Trump's deportation numbers. He says Trump has only been in office for a week, but the deportation numbers seem to be low. This is because Trump has only gotten in office and ICE is looking for low-hanging fruit, or are blue states and sanctuary cities hampering mass deportation efforts? If so, what measures can Trump use to punish said states for not assisting in deportations? I think it's just, as I said earlier, it is because of Biden policy. They really hindered these operations and they're just kickstarting it, and they do need more funding and resources, which is going to have to come from Congress. So we're going to have to wait around that for the boost. But right now the numbers are much higher than Biden. Obviously we want them to be even higher, but as long as they're in the 4 digits, I think they're good. I'm gonna go to his second question because he also talks about the tariffs. We'll go to the plane crash next, but he says, Kingslander asks, what do you think the outcome of the Mexico-Canada tariffs will be? Obviously, Canada and Mexico do not stand a fighting chance and will eventually have to capitulate to Trump in some form or another, but especially with things like Trump's bluster about taking Greenland and the Panama Canal back, do you think that it puts the U.S. on shaking ground with its allies, or will they have to just suck it up and accept it since the only alternative powers they can align with are Russia or China? Most of them are going to have to accept it because they're so economically dependent on America, and they are dependent on us for defense. Canada has a bad relationship with China and India right now, probably a lot more so than I don't know if more so than we do, but they're not on good terms with even, not like India is going to become a geopolitical force, but they're not on good terms with either Russia or China. So they can't turn to them. And Mexico is so economically dependent on us, they know they're going to have to cave. Really what's going to happen is that they're going to offer concessions because what they're doing is they're supposed to renegotiate the USMCA this year, which USMCA replaced NAFTA, and Trump wants to get more concessions from Canada and Mexico, and he particularly wants them to tighten border security. And all Canada and Mexico really have to do is just promise to tighten border security and to do a few other things on USMCA, and the tariffs will end. Now, some of them, it's a political matter for them because domestically, Trump's moves domestically in Canada and Mexico are very unpopular. So they feel that they gain political points by saying we're going to stand up to them and offer our counter tariffs. But they have more to lose than we do. Now, if the trade war continues, it's not going to be good for America because people want a good economy, and anything that's upsetting the economy is going to undermine Trump's agenda on other things. So it is a game of chicken that he's playing. But I think that Canada and Mexico also risk damaging their economies even more so by continuing with the trade war. So all they have to do is offer a few concessions and Trump can take the win. And if they just say, we're going to tighten border security, tariffs are gone. And Trump can claim victory in there. But yeah, neither of them are going to go with Russia or China. If anything, it would probably be more Mexico. But Mexico is still extremely dependent on America, far more than probably even more than Canada is. Even though you could maybe say, that's a debatable matter. But Trump is just, really feel tired of these smaller countries, these weaker countries taking advantage of us. So he's using American might to wield a big stick against them. It is funny, it's all our allies, but our allies are taking advantage of America generosity. So it's time to for them to pay up and to do more of their fair share, particularly when it comes to border control. So we got Kingslander. Now we're going to move on to the plane crash. If we have about two questions on that. So we do have two. One is from Liberal Farts College Apparatchik, and then the other is from KMax. So we'll start off with Liberal Farts College Apparatchik. He says, "What is the unique driving force in America that causes Americans to seek out conspiracies every time something bad happens?" I've seen tens of replies concerning, I think he meant tens of thousands, replies concerning tonight's plane crash, alleging that there is something big going on. This reminds me of the space lasers in Honolulu and the Nephilim at the mall in Florida. What causes this seemingly uniquely American phenomenon? And K-Max asks on a different angle, he asks, Scott, with DEI and other lax standards for excellence and competence, a plane crash at Reagan Airport after colliding into a helicopter in midair. In your view, was this a fluke, or would we expect this to see more of this going forward? Commercial flights having issues like this. I think K-Max asked something about the tariffs. Yeah, we'll just it's about. I actually want to. He was saying this for the mailbag. I'm going to go to this because we just talked about this matter, so I'm going to briefly summarize this. He wanted this for the mailbag, but K-Max asked, Scott, your view of Trump's tariffs with Canada, Mexico, and China, will they cause a backlash which will increase prices, or what are their intended effects? Is this an issue you do support Trump on, or is it more murky? Well, China tariffs, pretty much across the board, everyone agrees with. National security state, everybody feels like it's necessary to do tariffs with China. Biden himself even increased tariffs with China. They think it's a national security issue. So those are going to be more long-standing in a trade war with China. We do want to prohibit China's or hinder China's economic growth to a certain extent. So that's baked in the cake right now. Now, Canada and Mexico, as I made earlier, if it begins to have a significant economic effect in America, it's going to be very unpopular. And it's going to undermine Trump's administration, as I said. So with Canada and Mexico, it's more of a stunt or a threat to get them to concede, which I think they will concede, and we will not have a full-blown trade war with them. But if we do have a trade war with them, it's going to be unpopular in America. But a China trade war, that's just what America set on. Trump set the policy. Biden continued it. It's going to be the policy for America for a while now. So that's a different matter from Canada and Mexico. China is our geopolitical foe. Canada and Mexico are not, to say the least. So I support Trump so far on this. I trust Trump. I think he will get the concessions. But if he doesn't, it's probably not going to be very good for him. So just getting that question out of the way. And now I'm going to go to the plane crash. I'll start off with a K-Max angle with the DEI and other stuff. I think it's worth bringing up in here with the matter because air traffic controllers and pilots themselves, they have been trying to diversify them or lower standards to get more, to make them more diverse, and these problems can arise. I don't think this particular story was directly caused by it, even though you could say that air traffic controller shortages and a lot of their labor problems are caused by this. So you could say it's an indirect cause. Some people are claiming that the air traffic controller might have been a minority. By the voices, it didn't sound like it, but who knows? And it seems like it was complete human error. It was like a convergence of errors waiting to happen. You know, the helicopter pilot, well, it's a woman, so maybe there is some DEI there. And she, was having night vision goggles, and that limits your sight and your ability to discern things. And also, they didn't have proper communication between the air traffic control and others, or where they're particularly located. And air traffic control is like get behind the plane, but then they misjudge where everything is, and human error is mainly responsible for this. Bigger issues is I think that they need more air traffic controllers and more qualified air traffic controllers. And I think a lot of the moves that they made under the Biden administration to make them more diverse has hindered or hurt the air traffic control labor supply. I think also like flying these helicopters in dense airspace at night and night vision goggles is maybe not very smart, but they do this for training because they feel, if there's an attack or something and they have to, extract people from DC, they feel they have to do this training. The issue is that you could have these problems. I mean, there was a near crash, I believe, the night before dealing with this. So it is a major concern. I don't think it was a fluke because there's been a lot of near misses going on in the airline industry. There's just a lot of problems going on, with plane issues like engine problems or losing the wheels. They're not doing proper maintenance. And I do think a lot of this is a result of the government and a lot of these corporations trying to increase diversity, and they're not hiring the best people. So I think DEI is worth bringing up with the plane crash and the problems in the industry, even though it might not be a direct cause here. I believe it's human error. So now going to Liberal Farts College apparatchiks question on why people love conspiracy theories so much. The two reasons are here. One, it's more entertaining and exciting than simply saying human error. It's boring to think like this is just an accident. It's like, that the pilot didn't see the plane coming, misjudged where it was, and then they just crash. And there's not much of a story to it. It's just a tragedy of human error. That's not exciting. They want to think that there's something more here. The problem is people really couldn't think what it is. I mean, even though they were saying this is like a trial for a suicide mission or against Trump or something, I was like, no, it's not. It was just human error. So, but it's more exciting to believe this. Second reason is it's more comforting. I talked about this in my Blaming the Space Lasers article dealing with what was going on in California. It is very discomforting to think that all these things can be just caused by human error or Mother Nature. And we can't control these things. It creates this feeling of chaos that nobody's driving, nobody's in control, and that's very terrifying to a lot of people. They want to imagine that someone's in control. Even if these people are evil or bad or doing terrible things, they would much rather have someone in control than no one be in control and chaos reigns. And this is why they seek out the conspiracy theories, because with conspiracy theories, if it's like the wildfires are caused by space lasers or anything, then it's like humans are in charge and we just need to change the people who are in charge. And it's the same with this plane crash, is that you don't have to worry about flying unless there's bad people ordering a suicide mission of a helicopter into your plane. It's much more comforting to think that, like, okay, good people are in charge, I'm never going to get in a plane crash, rather than like human error could potentially, cause me to die. And just that feeling of chaos. People want control, people want order, and human life is much more chaotic than a lot of people want to accept. And so that's why they turn to conspiracy theories rather than just face reality. So that, I would say, now a uniquely American phenomenon. We've always been into conspiracy theories. I mean, ever since the revolution. I mean, the revolution in itself was encouraged by a lot of conspiracy theories. But I think it's just that we, as a country, we don't have the type of deference and social hierarchy that a lot of Europeans have built up, where they had, people that they're like, these are the people our leaders. These are the people we trust. And we're going to let them tell us what to do. And even though Europe has problems with that, they still defer to authority and elite leadership much more than Americans do. Americans have a real problem with deferring to authority. We really don't like deferring to authority. And if the media and other things tell us something, we're like, they must be lying to us. Even if they accept what the media is telling them, and often they do, they still don't want to think of themselves as buying everything the media is telling them. And a lot of our movies and music is all about the media's lying to, then they're repeating the media's framework. We don't like the appearance of deferring to authority. And now with social media making people question more things, and a lot of people not being smart enough or having enough discernment to realize what's BS and what's true, we lead with a lot of these absurd conspiracy theories. So that is my thoughts on that. And now we're going to finish up with K-Max's second question, he says, Scott, for Black History Month, if new figures can be discussed and not just older ones, how about Ibram X. Kendi for a Black History Month episode? Seems his balloon and grift burst all along. His spectacular failure should prove once and for all that going woke means going broke and has dire financial consequences. Chris Rufo's tweet, breaking Ibram X. Kendi's, already just talking about how Ibram X. Kendi's Center for Anti-Racist Research shut down at Boston, but now it's moving to Howard with him. He's switching to Howard. I forget if it was Boston University or Boston College. I'm pretty sure it was Boston University. And I was right. It was Boston University. I had to check up on that. So he was and so that shut down, and now he's moving to Howard. And so he's like, another BLM era grift come to a close. We're probably not going to do on Ibram X. Kendi. I mean, I could read one of his books like Stand from the Beginning or something and just talk about how stupid it is. Maybe the choices we have right now are the people we're going to be doing. So this week, it's going to be Booker T. Washington. Next week, it's going to be W.E.B. Du Bois. And the week after that, it's going to be Marcus Garvey. We're currently set on Barack Obama as the fourth because people have been asking for that. And it would not be on so much focus on Barack Obama's presidency, but the making of Barack Obama. I'm going to review David Garrow's controversial book, Rising Star, The Making of Barack Obama. That should be the final one. We may do an audible and do Ibram Kendi because I'm not sure if Ibram X. Kendi is still going to be in the news or be remembered next year. But we probably will do Kendi. If we don't do him this year, we might do him next year and review one of his stupid books. We'll have to see. Maybe Kendi comes back in time. So and later on in the 2020s, but we'll have to see. So, but the second part, going woke always means going broke. That wasn't really true for the 2020s. It was actually like they go woke and they make even more money. I mean, the most famous example was this Nike got Colin Kaepernick to do advertisements. And I think this is in 2018. Yeah, this was in 2018. And then everyone's like, we're going to boycott them. And then their, sales were continuing to do fine. There was no effect on their bottom line. And this continued to happen throughout the 2010s. The first time that there was ever a sign of going woke, going broke, was Bud Light. It was the first time that actually a conservative boycott worked. And since then, companies now are changing their policy. But Kendi is still going to be influential. He's not disappearing. He's just simply going to Harvard, or not Harvard, but Howard. So we'll have to see how that turns out. So it's a little bit too early to declare the end of Kendi. We'll have to see. It's probably better to wait for another year to see how that turns out. Liberal Farts College Apparatchik had another question, so we'll answer that. He said, the first few weeks of the Trump administration has been back-to-back white pills. This left seems so as demoralized as they've ever been, and normies are on our side or firmly settled into political apathy. What should we do to continue this momentum, rather? What should Anons be doing on X? What should local, state, federal, political staff be doing to support the president and further the message? And finally, what is to be done with black pillars who continue to counter-signal and pull us down? Should we respond with ridicule or ghettoize them through ignoring them? Just ignore them. There's no reason to. I mean, it's purely online. The only people upset who are right-wing are online. You don't really need to worry about it at this time. Continue this momentum. I just cheer it on. Be happy, praise him what he's doing. With local, state, federal political staff, that they need to pass laws to help Trump. Tennessee just passed an immigration bill that will help the administration enforce its immigration priorities. That's really all you need to do. I mean, just pass bills to encourage them to do stuff and punish sanctuary cities and help the ICE deport more illegals, send National Guard down to help with Border Patrol. That's really all you really have to do. I think that's it. It's pretty simple. Just keep supporting Trump and being white-pilled is my main takeaway from that. All right, so we got that. We're going to go with IPA Enjoyer. He says Matt Walsh has been tweeting to end all foreign aid, including to Israel, in his usual smugly disagreeable and safely edgy fashion. As much as I disdain it, conceptually, foreign aid, like the funny research grants people love to make hay about, is a very small drop in the bucket of our deficit. Saving $50 million by not sending condoms to Gaza isn't going to compensate for the $4 trillion spent on Social Security Medicare. How do we square this circle? Well, ending foreign aid is very popular, even though it sometimes is key to our foreign policy. But it's whatever. I'm not going to complain about that. The issue is like pretty much everything is small potatoes to what it really is, and it's these ballooning entitlements. And as I've said in past episodes, it's so politically unpopular to go up against Social Security. The only way that we're probably ever going to take care of it is, one, that there's a crisis that threatens our country's stability and we have to go after it, or two, the left begins to make an argument for cutting entitlements as a way of redistributing the wealth to others. And they're going to say all these old wealthy white people are the ones benefiting from it the most, so we need to cut it to give it to minorities. It's probably going to be the only way we're ever going to cut it. But no, a lot of the stuff is just small change in the bucket that we're doing. But that's all that's politically popular, is cutting the research grants and cutting foreign aid, which a lot of the stuff you could say is probably sort of ways productive. Even to the Gaza, I think it's not to Gaza, Palestine, it's to somewhere in Africa. And, ensuring that there's reproductive control in Africa is, is important to ensure that we don't have more migrants coming to to our lands from Africa. But whatever, it's happening. I'm not going to complain about it. I support the ending of the foreign aid, but the easiest things to cut, the most politically popular things to cut, is probably the things that there could be some benefit with, or that they're just small change. But they can claim victory on it. So hopefully we eventually take on entitlements, but whoever does is going to pay at the ballot box. And America is a democracy, so our elected lawmakers are disinclined to ever do that. So that is it for IPA Enjoyer. I think Kingslander had another question. Or no. He did. Actually, it's a similar what? Oh yeah, no. We answered that. So, Kingslander, we're going to go with Dollar Bill now. Dollar Bill asks, with the Super Bowl on Sunday, can you comment on a wild NFL conspiracy theory I heard about recently, that the games are scripted like pro wrestling matches? Specifically, the winner of the Super Bowl is determined in advance. The gist of it is the logo for the year's Super Bowl uses the jersey colors of the winning team a year before the game happens. Super Bowl 59 has red and yellow, which is why the Chiefs will win, and the Chiefs will win because they've paid their dues behind the scenes. The person sharing this also alluded to the halftime shows for this year's now being Illuminati rituals. Scott, I know you are very anti-conspiracy theory. What are your thoughts on this? That's not really how it's like. They're not communicating with that. It's just that the Chiefs, NFL officials, and others seem biased towards the Chiefs. The referee calls are always favor the Chiefs, no matter what. It is actually really ridiculous. If you ever watch these games, it is like the refs are playing for the Chiefs. They're the most valuable player. It's not like deep conspiracy theory like that, but it does. Last year, it seemed like it was rigged to get the Chiefs in because they wanted the Taylor Swift Super Bowl. This year, it feels like it's already happened, and the Chiefs were really good this year, but they shouldn't have won the AFC Championship. It was like the referees coming in and stepping in and helping them win. So there is some official favoritism towards the Chiefs. But the fan base is not reacting well to this. Like last year, you could say, there was all these new fans coming in through Taylor Swift, and all these other things. And so it was better for the NFL's bottom line and to reward their new fans to have the Chiefs win. This year it seems like it's like going to piss off their fan base if the Chiefs win. But all the fans hate the Chiefs-Eagles game, so we'll have to see. I don't think it's going to be rigged for the Chiefs. I am rooting for the Chiefs because Eagles have an obnoxious fan base. They're also Democrat coded. Their owner's a Democrat. Their fan base is very Democrat because it is Philly. While Chiefs are red coded. They've got a Trump supporting owner. I think they have the most conservative fan base of any team in the NFL, or one of the most conservative fan bases of any team in the NFL, with the Kansas City area. So, and generally, if you look at the crowd, it looks like nice white people, unlike the Eagles fans. So that's so we're going to be rooting for the Chiefs this year. So, second question from Dollar Bill. I like to listen to an AM radio show in my city that has a segment with a severe Trump derangement syndrome infected commentator from a newspaper, and here's how he predicts Trump's presidency will collapse. Trump's tariffs on Canada will cause his prices on consumer goods to shoot through the roof. Canada's targeted counter tariffs on red state products like Jack Daniel's whiskey and Florida orange juice will cause GOP governors to turn on the White House. The shadowy cabal of billionaires who control the presidency will see how much these tariffs are losing them money and will have Trump deposed within a year through the 25th Amendment. Clearly, this guy is a copium dealer. Are liberal commentators reaching for these more Alex Jones adjacent narratives because, unlike in 2017, MSNBC isn't assuring them that Trump will be going to jail because the walls are closing in? Mueller is going to indict Trump. Yeah, I think there's a little bit about that. But they really are trying to tamp down on TDS this time. They simply just say this is going to be a political problem for Trump and this is going to benefit us in 2026 and 2028, rather than Mueller is going to arrest Trump and he's going to be going in jail. So it is very different this time. So they are wanting this stuff. GOP governors won't have the advantage of ever turning on Trump, even if it's primarily hurting them more than it is other states. And the shadowy cabal of billionaires aren't really in control either. So, and I don't think we're going to get to this point where it gets a trade war. Now, if we do have a trade war, there is going to be political consequences for Trump, but it's not going to be anywhere like this guy's fantasy. So no need to fear about that, is my opinion on the matter. Now we've got one from New England refugee. Usually I like to end on him, but yeah, we'll start up. We'll get him right now. He says, in 2023, the murder clearance rate in the United States was 57.8%. This means that 57.8% of murders were cleared by arrests. Explanation: the clearance rate is the percentage of reported crimes that are solved by arrest or exception. The clearance rate for murder in the U.S. has been decreasing since the 1960s. In 2020, the clearance rate for murder in the U.S. dropped to 50%, which was the lowest it had ever been. The clearance rate for murder varies between countries. For example, in Finland, the clearance rate is around 98%, while in Trinidad and Tobago, it is around 24%. Besides magic, what are the causes behind low clearance rate? Is it just magic? Well, it is dealing with magic because, one, it's hard for them to get eyewitnesses or people to snitch on these matters. You know, they don't want to cooperate with police. And pretty much all our murders happen within the black community. The murder rates, they say 13 do 50, but it's actually like 13 do 62%. And it's likely higher because this is only accounting for solved murders. So it's likely 13 does 75% or at least 70%. So, and it's primarily black on black. So if no eyewitnesses come forward and it's like, well, we don't know who did the drive-by, how are they going to solve the murder? And also, most of the murders are happening in places that are incompetently run, black-run cities, like Jackson, Mississippi, like Birmingham, like St. Louis, or in East St. Louis. And a lot of these places, it's politically difficult for them to solve a lot of the crimes, or in Baltimore and places like this. So it's, they're going to have incompetent police officers having to deal with a community that refuses to cooperate with them, and thus we get a very low murder clearance rate. The fact that it's been going up is I guess a positive sign, because I remember when we just had a 50% clearance rate, so it is improving somewhat, and I think it is probably that our murder rate has gone down a little, has gone down since 2020 2021. So we now have that, but you can actually see it in this, third world shitholes, they don't solve murders, while in and first world European countries with very few murders, they pretty much solve every one of them. And it's just a matter of trust and their cooperation with police, and whether people know what's going on around them. And the fact is that most of the murders happen within a community that doesn't want to cooperate with police, and no one will say what they heard, or that they're worried about themselves being shot. Snitches get stitches, or even worse. So that doesn't. That's primarily what it is. No, it is. So in the end, yes, it is just magic, and the way that their culture operates, both in how they run their cities and in the communities, and how they cooperate with police. So we have a bit of breaking news while we're recording this episode. This is a problem that when you pre-record in the morning, that sometimes things will change in the morning between when it's posted. And Mexico appears to be, as I said, giving in to what Trump wants them to do and making the minor concessions, and they're sending troops up to the border to secure it, and they are holding off on tariffs. So now they have an agreement. Now it balls in court, in the court of Ball is in Canada's court to do the same, or do similar measures to ease up on the trade war. And so this is likely the concession he's going to want from Canada. If Canada makes this move by the time of the podcast recording, well, you guys can know that my thinking on this matter was correct on what they would do to the concessions that were needed to avoid a trade war. So we're not going to be one, or likely not going to be in one with Mexico. Now we'll just see what happens with Canada, but I imagine Canada is going to do the same thing as Mexico. Moving along with questions, we've got a couple from John Chandler. John Chandler asks, last week I saw the attached map showing the white percentage of total births for 2023 in each state. Seeing it reminded me that I actually wanted to ask you about this a long time ago. I actually think this issue might have been touched on a little bit towards the end of the last mailbag. I must admit the numbers are really jarring. For example, it shows the white share of births in states like Georgia at only 33% and Arizona at 27%. Even Vermont is only 60%. In fact, not many states have white births above 60 or 70%. While I cannot attest to the exact accuracy of these particular numbers, I have seen very similar ones over the years. I know demography isn't everything, and who knows what the future actually holds, but curious to hear your thoughts over how concerned we should be. And I'm certainly not saying we should give up or that things are hopeless, but I think it is really worth a conversation. No, it is really bleak. No, the numbers probably are accurate, because I remember looking at figures, I think it was from 2021 or 2022, and they showed the number of births to white women, and they were under 50%. And likely with both parents being white, people could only estimate, because the way the data is, it's up in the air. And it's likely at least, or at most 45%, like potentially lower. I had somebody who was saying, I won't name the name, but there was somebody on the thing that's like, actually, it might be, it's actually probably right at 49%, because most of the women who don't declare the race of the husband probably had an elder wedlock child with a white guy. And it's like, have you met single moms lately? Usually not the case. So it's tough to say what it is. It's really is tough to give an answer on it, because it is bleak in when you see these birth rates. But I mean, we knew this was going to happen. When white minority, we're going to be a white minority country by at least 2040. Probably, depending on how they do the census, it appears they're probably going to keep Trump. Well, Trump, they want to keep Middle Eastern, North African as white for census figures and census calculation and other things. So the white percentage, will still be white majority by 2030 just for that. If they had taken that away, I could see there's a potential that non-Hispanic white could be below 50% by even 2030. But I think with the MENA category still being counted as white, so that's about going to be about like 2% of the population, maybe a little bit less. It'll ensure that's over 50%. But it's just what's happening. And you do have to wonder where these rates are coming from because there's so much interracial or so much interracial births now that you have to wonder where they're getting these figures. And it's not like hospitals are like both husband and wife white. They don't ask these questions. It's just the race of the mother. I think that they're keeping it. So you do have to wonder where these figures are coming from, and they might be worse than they are. I mean, there is a potential that they could even be worse than or the real figures could be worse than what you're even seeing. So you have to wonder where these numbers are coming from. But they are within the ballpark of what we're seeing. So it's tough to answer the question on what it is because there's a lot to say there. I mean, it's like a whole a whole podcast or even a whole book can be written about it. So I don't know. That white minority is pretty much white minority America is pretty much guaranteed. It's baked in the cake, as we said, and so you have to figure out what to do next with that in mind. And you do have to realize these figures are there. Now, maybe a lot of them are being born to illegal immigrants who are going to be deported. Now, yeah, those could be birthright citizens, but they might go with their family anyway. There are a few silver linings in that, and maybe there is a fact that the reason why there's a low births is that a lot of whites, both parents are white, are just not attributing white to their child, but they are in fact white. So you have to see. It's not worth giving up hope, and there are some questions I have about it, but it's what we expect. So that's more on this will obviously be said in the future on this podcast. But anyway, second question. What are your thoughts regarding Roger Scruton? He never seemed to be touched on race or identity as explicitly as we like, but I would say his philosophical reflections on real conservatism and depth of knowledge on music, art, literature, etc. are worth reading and listen. I liked his book on Wagner, or his books on Wagner, so I think he's worthwhile to read on philosophy and other things. The kind of Anglo-conservatism he embodied, the love for the permanent things and other things, I don't think that has much relevance. It's whatever. It's fine. But no, I think he's fine. I'm not a huge Roger Scruton fanatic. And generally people who are really into Roger Scruton, it's almost a red flag. But I think he's fun to read. I've read some of his books on culture and philosophy. I think that's fine to read on those matters. So that would be my short take on Scruton. We could probably do an IQ supplement on him would probably be worthwhile at some point. But moving right along, I think we got some questions from Fake Cell Eradicator. He asked, true or false, Tucker Carlson could beat Susan Collins in a Maine GOP primary. If he did, Joe Scarborough would enter the race on the Democrat side. Obviously, neither one of them would need the headache of this, and being in Congress would be a step down in life. No, Tucker could not beat Susan Collins in a Maine Republican primary. He would lose. Joe Scarborough would not enter against Tucker Carlson in a race. I could see Joe Scarborough entering politics again, I guess in Maine. But Democrats wouldn't want him. He's not left-wing enough for Maine Democrats. And they don't want him running for Republicans. So he doesn't really have a party to run in. But no, Tucker Carlson would lose in a Maine GOP primary to Susan Collins. I mean, a lot of them are very moderate and not about Tucker. And also he'd have to defend his World War II positions and a lot of other things that I don't think would sit well with a lot of voters. So I'm gonna have to rate that all as false. The whole situation as false. But so that's my opinion on that. We have got more questions. Let's see. We'll go with Werner. He says, Scott, do you think whiteness will become more important in the future of America? We saw this in the election with a multiracial coalition rejecting wokeness and anti-white racism. Do you think that despite whites making up a smaller percentage of the population, we will simultaneously retain power in key positions and become more conservative simultaneously? Looks like the future of America is something like Arizona or Texas demographically and politically. Well, Arizona whites don't vote very well for Republicans. Texas whites do. Arizona whites, not so much. It's about there. Thankfully, it's about 50% of Hispanics and whites in Arizona vote GOP. There's also not that many blacks there compared to Texas and some of the other southeast, so they do benefit from having like electorate where everyone's up for grabs. It's like 50% across the board for everyone. So it's a weird state. Texas, the whites are better. So are they in Georgia and a couple of other places. The whites are vote, 70% or so GOP, 60 to 70% GOP, maybe even higher. Like Mississippi whites, it's very GOP. It depends on the presence of blacks. Generally, whites vote overwhelmingly GOP. Without the presence of blacks, it becomes more complicated because California, California doesn't have as many blacks as you would think, and whites there are pretty libtarded, and they're also very libtarded in the Pacific Northwest where there's not that many blacks, and in New England where there's not that many blacks. If you have a presence of blacks, whites vote better. So that's like the real key issue. So on whiteness becoming more important in the future of America, well, whites still have a lot of cachet in the country because one, everyone wants to date us. All the other groups, they want a white partner, spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. They want a white significant other. So we still are at the top of the dating market. There's still like you want to go to a party filled with attractive white people. So there's still that there. And also whites are still going to be, ruling the roost in a lot of these middle American suburbs and doing financially well. Like we're not going to be a subaltern class. A lot of people, some right wingers think we're like turning into an oppressed class. Like the Boers of South Africa, or even comparing us to like ghetto blacks in the 1950s. We are not being reduced to that stature. The thing is, and even if you look at the makeup of Congress, it's still overwhelmingly white. Now, they might not want to admit that, or they're not acting for white interests, but it's still overwhelmingly white. So it's the reason why like non-whites see this country. They see all the history, they see who the leaders, they see who's attractive, they see who's on the cover of magazines and who's called the hottest actress and other things. They think that it's like too white and that they're not upheld as the beauty standards or as enough leaders like them. So they have that resentment. So whiteness of that sort is still going to have relevance. And even right now with the kind of backlash to woke, it is highlighting an implicit whiteness. But it's not quite the whiteness we want. Because it's more like Shane Gillis, Bud Light, Nashville whiteness, which is and this is Bud Light post the trans ads. This is not the Dylan Mulvaney Bud Light. That's the type of whiteness is, and it's kind of we're too busy to be woke, we're too busy to be right wing, we're just having a good time. And, we don't really care much about history. We just want to make money and live free of wokeness and of racism, too. And so that's sort of the whiteness there. It's like a Nashville whiteness. And it's certainly better than the alternative, but it's not quite what we want. So you do have that tension or conflict there in that matter. So that is something we're going to have to look out for. But no, it's still going to be very relevant and still very powerful in this country and influential. And we're still going to be, 150 million at least of the population. We're still going to be the largest share of the population for a long time. And some of the Hispanics will be mixed in, and maybe a lot of them will start to claim whiteness or some other new identity. We'll have to see what it comes down to. This is similar to the last question I got. So it's an interesting future, but whiteness is not going to disappear from the country. We got one from Sharecrop. Sharecrop asks, "Hi Scott, you mentioned how folks and y'all have been culturally appropriated by the losers on the left." We're going to have to censor his term. I don't know how YouTube censorship's still working, but I remember in 2020 they would use that. Redundant, and I agree. I had a thought a while ago about how the term woke is also ebonics for awoken, meaning enlightened. I also noticed that gay race communism is always just a method of usurping power. In its real world application, it is always, in the end, we are entitled to this, not you. So with that said, and sparing the nuance of current day America, is what we see today akin to any other movement in history? Is there another example of minorities taking over a nation because the inhabitants are too hospitable and polite to want to stop it? Rome? Probably Rome. Rome's the only real example I can think of with it, but likely when people like read about Rome, it's more complicated because people think like this is 400 AD. Like the decline is really apparent. The collapse has already happened. No, it's more like 100 AD. Maybe you can give or take, maybe 280. We're far away from the collapse and other things, but interesting things are afoot. And what happened is that they were bringing in all these foreign elements into Rome. They were Romanizing them to a certain point because they were seeing themselves as Roman. They were speaking Latin, but they had no direct connection to the previous culture. And a lot, illiteracy was high and other things, so they didn't care about Livy or any of the great, Latin elements of Latin culture. But they were otherwise Roman, even if they looked extremely different from the Romans of the Roman Republic era. And so that's more of what could happen. Probably not quite the case. I mean, if Hispanics are starting to name their kids George Washington Lopez and stuff, which is like what was happening with the Romans, it would be like somebody who is like just assimilated and they're like Julius Agrippa. Like they would take all these over the top Roman names and then they're like have no Roman blood whatsoever. That could be it. And so, but that wasn't so much in hospitable. It was just that Romans, I mean, the reason why they conquered and dominated so much is that they did have this method of assimilation, which the other powers didn't. Now, originally it was just limited to those related to them. It was like fellow Latins, Italians, and other things. And they were really wanting to keep that identity, but in the empire, they began expanding it. Even Julius Caesar was beginning to expand it of who could be a Roman. And then they continued to expand it within the Roman Empire. And so we are witnessing that as well in our country. So it is going to be a little bit different of what happens with the appropriation and other things. So yeah, if you ever want to find out what's happening in America, even though it's different and we have a different form of government, the most similarities we have is with the Roman Empire. Not like 4th and 5th century Roman Empire, but earlier Roman Empire. And I think that's the most worthwhile to learn from our experience, especially because we're the dominant power in the same way that the Romans were. People want to compare us to Weimar. We're not Weimar. French Third Republic, sort of. American Civil War, no. Russian Revolution, Civil War, no. A lot of those, Spanish Civil War, absolutely not. These don't really have the comparisons. If you're wanting to look for a historical element, it's Rome, but there are significant differences as well. So that's my answer to sharecrop. We've got stealth bomber. We still got, a very special person at the end. We're saving for best for last. We're not saving the least for last. We'll say that. But we've got a very special person at the end. If I missed you today, harass me. I'll make sure to get you for the mailbag. So, Stealth Bomber asks, what is your stance on working from home? This may be hypocritical for me as I work from home myself, as I assume you do, but I don't think that it's something the average person should be doing. While there are special cases like mine where remote work has clear benefits, I knew many during the pandemic who took advantage of the lack of supervision and did no work. With that in mind, I also totally support Trump's return to work order for federal workers, especially knowing what the average federal worker is like. Yeah, this is a selfish thing because, like, for myself, yes. Well, obviously, I have no office to go to. I work for myself. So I really enjoy working from home, but it's not for everyone. One, people need the social connection there. A lot of this drives people crazy if they're not around people and socializing and they get weirder and other things. There's that. Two, as an economy, we need people returning to these offices because if we had like all these offices being empty, and that can create some real problems for their economy. So you need to go back to the office. Three, there is a thing is like a lot of people are just never going to do work. They're never going to do work if they do not have the direct supervision, especially with the federal government. So I support it. I liked working in the office when I did have to work in the office, or enjoyed working in the Daily Caller, and it gave you structure and other things. But like with my type of work and what I do now, obviously it'd be idiotic for me to go into any type of office. But yes, no, I do. I don't think it's not good for the entire society to be working from home. We need to encourage people to go to the office, be there, be socialized, have people directly overseeing them, making sure they're doing work, because working from home, we already saw the problems during COVID. We're seeing the problems with the federal government. They need to return to the office. That's my thoughts on that. So now for final, we have Mishaus, our favorite character, with also always great questions. He says, "What is your opinion on the brony phenomenon that colonized the entire internet for a few years?" This might shock you, but I am not a brony fan. I thought it was really weird. I met one guy. Oh man, this guy is now really old. This guy's got to be in his 30s. I met this guy in my early 20s who was otherwise normal and stuff, but then he's like, "I'm a brony." And I was like, "Really?" And I was like, that's weird. There was a Countercurrents article, I think this guy still might write for Countercurrents. I'm not sure. But he was like a brony nationalist. And I remember he wrote an article about brony nationalism. And we're all like, what the hell is this? So the brony phenomenon was, not a fan. There was something very weird to it. I don't think it's very masculine to be into My Little Pony and other things. So sorry if there are any brony Greer heads out there. But I think brony is like an early 2010s thing. And hasn't survived into the 2020s. And I think a lot of those bronies turned into furries, which are even worse than the bronies. So we're not a fan of the brony phenomenon, unfortunately. But sorry to any potential bronies that might be out there listening. Second question, will you do an IQ supplement on the formerish king of libtards, Michael Moore? I regret to inform you that Landwell is still kicking and still propagating the same things he was 20 years ago. That actually would be a very good IQ supplement. I should I would watch his Fahrenheit 9/11 and Bowling for Columbine. And he did one on healthcare in 2009. Or he did one on the economy. I could do the 4 films he did from the 2000s. I think he did about 4, would be worthwhile to highlight what liberalism was like in the 2000s. So yes, I will do an IQ supplement on Michael Moore at some point. Once we have the news hook, or if I find the films, it might just be on one film, like Fahrenheit 9/11. which I think is probably the best to do, because there is this forgotten aspect about how liberals thought that George W. Bush was a fascist, which sounds ridiculous now, especially with them all loving George W. Bush as he's their favorite Republican president. So it's worth revisiting Fahrenheit 9/11 to see how libtards were like at that age. And I remember, Oscar speeches from that time. They're all like, he's a fascist. So it would be funny to revisit that and see how liberals viewed George W. Bush at the time. So that is it for the Highly Respected today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. We're going to have more great content this week. We're on our normal schedule this week. So column tomorrow, Mailbag Wednesday, column Thursday, and a great IQ supplement on Friday. And we're starting off our Black History Month special. So it will be a Booker T. Washington IQ supplement Friday, W.E.B. Du Bois next week, Marcus Garvey following that, and likely Barack Obama. It will probably be Barack Obama, but the pre-presidential life, or the making of Barack Obama, for the final episode in our Black History Month special. So we've got to celebrate Black History Month here. I know our fans are wanting that from Highly Respected. So, well, it's good. A lot of right-wingers don't interact with Black literature, Black history, and identity in a serious manner. So I think it's important to understand their thinkers and figures and what they were saying and how this can influence us. So that's important to know. So that is it for Highly Respected today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. So more great content in the future. So until next time, stay respected.